If anyone had suggested you inject disinfectant into your body, you would have called them crazy, right? Well, that's exactly what happened during the COVID crisis with our commander-in-chief at the time, Mr. Donald Trump. Let's take a listen to what he said.
Yeah, I mean, this is the question of the moment. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago going into an election?
And I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting.
Right, folks who could.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning?
So he was trying to come off as this smart person, suggesting that I guess we all forgot all the crazy stuff that went on during COVID. Imagine Commander-in-Chief requesting or suggesting we inject bleach or disinfectant into our bodies in order to cure COVID. It was a crazy time, but I guess a lot of us forgot exactly what went on. So now here is Jasmine Crockett talking about the next pandemic and our readiness for when it arrives.
And when the next pandemic arrives, we will actually be prepared and have science so that we can stay on top of this. Because the last time I checked, and doctor, correct me if I'm wrong, having a leader suggest that we should inject bleach. Are you aware of anyone being cured of COVID-19 because they injected bleach into their body?
I am unaware of any such thing.
So that was the Food and Drug Administration Commission. Dr. Robert Califf testified in front of the House.
The last area that I'm going to touch on in my last 45 seconds, because I am a woman out of the state of Texas, there is no way that I am going to have a conversation and not talk about reproductive access. So out of curiosity, would you consider the medical management of a miscarriage to be potentially a life-saving usage? Yes or no?
I have to decline to answer that because
that is perfectly fine.
Adjudication by the Supreme Court.
That is perfectly fine. I'm gonna tell you yes, but I'm gonna give you another question that you can answer. Would you consider erectile dysfunction as a life-saving usage for Viagra?
Not life-saving.
Not life-saving. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you that based on my research that mifepristone actually has life-saving characteristics, yet Viagra doesn't. And for those that don't know, Viagra, from my understanding, is actually nearly 10 times greater as it relates to risk of death. Yet for some reason, it's not sitting in the court right now. And I do appreciate the fact that you laid out that when it comes down to getting drugs approved, they actually go through trials. It's not just randomness. You take the randomness, you then say, maybe there's some evidence here, and then you put it through the ringer. After putting it through the ringer for decades, women's lives have been saved. And as a representative from the area that Roe v. Wade actually initiated, I am appalled because for whatever reason, some people want us to go back to horse and buggy in this country. And I think since now maybe we have the internet, maybe we should take advantage of it. And we shouldn't say that we should remain in the times of horse and buggy. And so with that, thank you for the work that the FDA does. I respect your research. I recognize that the courts don't do research. I also recognize that this chamber seemingly doesn't care about research, but because of the work that you do, there are lives that are being saved, and I need you to be funded to the fullest extent to make sure that we can continue to save American lives.
Let's listen to Donald Trump one more time as President, Commander-in-Chief, his suggestion in curing COVID.
And then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that? By injection inside or almost a cleaning, because you see it gets in the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me.
Lawmakers and leaders have to be very careful what they suggest. in times of crisis like COVID, because a lot of people will try it. And I'm sure there's some folks who followed Donald Trump tried it, and folks who didn't even follow him, I'm sure they tried it. But if you want a quick death, that is something you would do. I would not recommend it because it would lead to an early death.
I'm so excited because this means that as we are looking at trials, as we're looking at diversifying them, we will have a great opportunity right there in Texas 30. It is a huge investment in science to make sure that we can save lives. And when the next pandemic arrives, we will actually be prepared and have science so that we can stay on top of this.
Now here is Representative Crockett questioning Tony Bobulinski about Election LLC.
Do you know who Elections LLC is? Yeah.
Well, it's not a who.
Okay, well, do you know what it is?
Yes, it's a LLC.
Okay, and is it the LLC that your attorney works for?
I believe so, yes.
You believe so, okay. So at this point in time, I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a document indicating that the law firm representing Tony Bobulinski was paid $10,000 as recently as January of this year by the Save America PAC, which you may recognize as Donald Trump's PAC.
Without objection.
Thank you. Now, so far in this hearing, it has felt like the worst episode of The Apprentice. I'm sure you're familiar with that show. It seems like my colleagues and maybe you and some others are trying to become the next vice president of the United States of America. You're auditioning or something like that because Mr. Bobulinski, I know that you take exception to the fact that your credibility has been called into question over and over. But when someone comes to testify under oath, whether it's before this committee, behind closed doors, or in person, then we have to evaluate someone's credibility. And sir, I definitely have always had issues with your credibility, as I know that you are very well aware of. So let me remind you of what happened behind closed doors.
Well, you should ask O'Connor about my credibility.
You a question. Okay?
You are?
When I haven't. So when I ask you a question, that's when you answer. Otherwise, I'm talking. So,
excuse me?
With my time, because it's my time, I want to be clear that when we were behind closed doors, you called a number of people liars. You called the Wall Street Journal liars. You called Cassidy Hutchinson a liar. You called the FBI a liar. You called Rob Walker a liar. You called James Gilliar a liar. You called Hunter Biden a liar. You called Jim Biden a liar. And just today, you added to your list, you called my colleague, Congressman Mr. Goldman, a liar as well. It seems like, according to you, the only person that's telling the truth is you and everyone else is lying. But I want to move on to something else.
Is that a question?
It's not a question.
Okay.
You'll know when I ask you a question, I promise.
Thank you.
So, the other thing that I want to talk about is the fact that my colleague from the other side of the aisle talked about the company that we keep. And she wanted to go through a list of people that she felt like were bad company because right now the majority has been relying upon the testimony of someone who's currently sitting in federal prison. And we know that your company is the company of somebody who's been found liable of fraud, as well as defamation, as well as sexual assault, and for whatever reason can't pay his bills at this point in time. But I'm going to ask Mr. Parnas, so this is a question to him. Are you aware if Trump had any associates that have been found guilty of anything?
Yes, lots of them.
Lots of them.
Me included.
You included. Okay, so when you were called here to testify, you weren't called here to testify for any other reason than to tell the truth. Is that correct?
Yes, Congresswoman.
Now, we started this whole sham off because of the 1023, and that was debunked by you, was it not?
Yes, Congresswoman.
Way before we started this impeachment inquiry, and you mentioned a number of times this guy by the name of Rudy Giuliani.
Yes.
Now, everybody is so stressed about the fact that Hunter ain't here today. But, Hunter came and testified behind closed doors for over 6 hours. And every single one of them, they weren't limited to 5 minutes. They could ask whatever they wanted to. And there is a full transcript of his testimony. So I don't know what else they wanted to do besides the fact that they wanted to put on the show. But let me tell you something. This whole thing is based upon something that Giuliani came up with.
Yes.
And we tried to subpoena him that's what I remember. If anybody else remember, we asked, we said, hey, we should subpoena Giuliani. But kind of like when we were trying to get his cell phone, they shut it down, right? Like they don't want the facts. But you would agree with me that considering the fact that you were working under Rudy Giuliani at the time that you went over to Ukraine, that he has maybe some valuable information that he could offer this committee as to whether or not there's anything that we should be investigating in the first place.
Absolutely, Congresswoman. I wish that this committee would subpoena Rudy Giuliani, put him under oath alongside me to get to the bottom of the truth of what actually happened in Ukraine and to the manipulation that Trump and Giuliani and the team went to do.
I agree with you, but somehow it doesn't look like we're going to get there, and I thank you for your time.
So here is some more testimony in the House with Jasmine Crockett outstandingly questioning the witness, Ms. Kaskin, after Representative Bolber dismissed her and was very rude in interruption as well as not allowing the witness to finish her statement. But Representative Crockett made up for it. She gives her some of her own time to complete her sentence that Ms. Barber did not give her the opportunity to complete. Let's take a listen.
With respect, I was trying to answer your question before you interrupted me to say that the ATF had in each of these instances sufficient statutory authority from Congress and that any challenges to that.
Ms. Katzen, it is my time. So Congress never authorized the ATF to ban pistol braces. Congress never authorized the ATF to do that, to make millions of Americans felons overnight. And so I would go back to your statement that you said in your testimony that these agencies are not free agencies and they can only do which Congress has delegated to them to do.
Congress is not specific. Excuse me.
Thank you. My time. No, ma'am. It's my time. Thank you.
Oh, I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Katzen,
So you are not
your
interested in
testimony-
my views.
It is my time. Thank you.
So Ms. Barber did not want to hear from the witness. She just wanted to make a statement. But the committee really is set up to hear witnesses, not only the committee giving their statements. So now, here is Representative Crockett giving the witness some of her own time because Ms. Barber did not allow her to speak completely.
This committee runs my pressure up. And I do come prepared to committee, and then there's always somebody from this side that does something ridiculous that throws me all the way off. So, oh, Jesus. Okay, so this is where we're going to start, Ms. Kaskin. First of all, let me apologize because that was uncalled for. So let me do what she would never do, which is to be an adult in this room or in this chamber. So let me start there. I'm also going to start with some nonsense that she was trying to spew. And unlike Ms. Bobert, I am legally trained. And I've passed a few bar exams, and I also legislated before I got here. So I do want to start with correcting the record a little bit. And if you want to add to that, please do. There was conversation about ATF because my colleagues love to talk about their guns, baby. And I'm from Texas. So let me be clear. I also own firearms. Let me scream. Democrats own guns too. Let me make it clear. I own guns and I'm licensed to carry. That is a regulation. Regulations aren't necessarily bad. It didn't stop me from being able to get a gun. So we were talking about, or y'all were talking about the ATF, which I wasn't going there. I didn't plan to go there. But you know what? I honestly wish the ATF would run amok because we know that seemingly the people that run this chamber don't have the courage to come up with one of the things we've heard is common sense regulations when it comes to guns. And to be clear, Our Constitution, the Second Amendment, anticipates people having common sense. Unfortunately, we have not done that, and unfortunately, it has cost us lives. So when you were testifying a little bit earlier, you talked about unintended consequences and the fact that we are supposed to be able to anticipate that as lawmakers when we are writing laws. Unfortunately, not only have we ignored the unintended consequences, but we've got foreseeable consequences that are continually ignored. And that is why we are talking about regulation and intended consequences. And the fact that we are supposed to be able to anticipate that as lawmakers when we are writing laws. Unfortunately, not only have we ignored the unintended consequences, but we've got foreseeable consequences that are continually ignored. And that is why we are talking about regulation, at least on this side of the aisle. And our definition of common sense is one that doesn't keep us in the pockets of corporations, but keeps us in the pockets of the people. Because what I'm trying to do is save lives. My job isn't here to make sure that I'm pushing the bottom line for some corporation, but it's to make sure that the people that put me into this seat, which were actual people, individuals, to make sure that I can save lives. So let's talk about my state, because we always got good stuff coming out of Texas. Unfortunately, my state decided that it didn't want to be a part of the overall national grid, because my state did not want to deal with all of the quote unquote red tape. The cost of that was lives. So we had this winter storm, and here it was, I was freshly being sworn into the Texas House, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do, because I started getting calls, because there is this thing called climate change. Hello, nobody's in the chamber on the other side, but climate change is this real thing. And so in Texas, we had this terrible storm that took place, and even though we are an energy capital, not just in this country, but in the world, for clean and dirty energy, unfortunately, we couldn't keep our own lights on, and it was all because they wanted to avoid red tape. You know what the cost of that was? It was human lives. And I think that that's what's being lost. You know what happened in Palestine or East Palestine? The cost was human lives. Unfortunately, seemingly, some people don't want to consider human lives as an actual cost. The only cost that they ever talk about is dollars. Well, let me be clear. I'm not here because of corporate dollars. I'm here because of people. And so I am curious to know, and I'm going to give you, and I usually run out of time. I'm going to be clear. I always run out of time because they always give me too much to do. But because of the way that you were treated, I am going to allow you the courtesy of expounding upon what it was that you were talking about with these agencies, which is pretty much what I understood, which is they only did what they were delegated to do, because if ATF could do more, I'm sure that we would actually get rid of the assault rifles that are constantly killing our babies every single day in this country. But go ahead, Ms. Kaskin, with the last 20 seconds.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and I thank you for them.
And that was Representative Crockett bringing back some type of courtesy in the House at that moment. Now, let's see some other interesting clips in the House that made the news.
Are you aware that China does not like the United States and that has engaged in espionage activities against the United States?
I don't have any personal professional knowledge of that.
Okay, well, I suggest you read Breitbart.
So let's get a little education on what is Breitbart News. So I'm taking this information straight from Wikipedia.
Breitbart News is a right-wing news and politics website. It was created by the libertarian political commentator Andrew Breitbart. Andrew Breitbart said that he wanted his website to be like the Huffington Post right-wing. Andrew Breitbart died in 2012. He was replaced by Steve Bannon. In 2016, Bannon said he wanted to turn Breitbart News into a platform for the alt-right. Bannon left Breitbart News to work for Donald Trump at the White House. He later came back to Breitbart News.
So here is Representative Crockett addressing Breitbart since it was brought up.
Ceases to amaze me what will come out of some of my colleagues' mouths. So it was suggested that you should read Breitbart, and I couldn't let it go. And so just for the general public, because I don't want anybody to believe that that's a good idea, I just got on Google, which if you have a cell phone, we can all do that. Breitbart News content has been described as misogynistic, xenophobic, and racist by academics and journalists. So I don't know that that's where I want anybody to take their cues from, especially when they're trying to run this country.
Here is another teeth-clenching moment. You have to do your homework before you open your mouth in the house, because there's always a colleague of yours that's going to make you look stupid. Or across the aisle if you don't have all your ducks in a row.
Lady from Florida, 30 seconds. The gentle lady is recognized.
Chairman, I couldn't help but pull out my pocket constitution, and I couldn't seem to find anywhere in here where it says we need to fund programs for humanitarian aid for women and children in Afghanistan. So with that, I just wanted to point that out, and I yield my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the text is not in the Constitution, it's in the bill. And with that, I yield.
You see, this is why it's very important to do your homework. She was looking in the wrong book. Here is another memorable moment from Representative Jasmine Crockett.
We've got to talk about these root causes. Number one, the fact that we have elected legislators that won't do their job and protect people by keeping these weapons off the streets. That's number one. Number two, we are still reeling from a financial crisis. And guess what? They don't want to make it better. I'm sure they all campaigned and said, oh, we're going to help out the economy post-COVID. But right now we are on a cliff over the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling that was raised 3 times under Trump, and 25% of this credit card bill that they don't want to pay was accrued under Trump, and he only had 1 term. And hopefully he won't have no more.
So this rep is asking the witness to do his job and make people feel safe, while you have somebody who's running for office who has a history of SA assaults, allegedly. And this person, she approves of and endorses. So Jasmine Crockett is calling her out on it.
But what I am asking is for you to do your job and make people feel safe, especially those that are depending on you to do it. When you see cases of, 48% increase in sexual assault cases, my goodness.
So
That's it. I've heard enough. Chairman, I yield my.
And notice, folks, before he can get out his answer, she cut him off and was off the record, so he could not respond.
Sexual abuse. I am so excited that my colleagues across the aisle care about sexual abuse, considering that the front runner right now for presidency is kind of just been found liable of sexual abuse. So I'm excited because this may mean that finally some folk will back off from supporting him, because we don't support sexual abusers in this chamber. So I'm happy about this.
So we had some exciting moments in the House last year as well as this year. Thanks to all the major news sources like MSNBC and NBC for giving us the footage of these congressional hearings. So here's another clip of Representative Jasmine Crockett talking about the impeachment hearings of Joe Biden and how an ex-president, namely Donald Trump, has so many counts against him, unlawful counts, and the Republicans have blinders on that they can't see that these are probably high crimes and misdemeanors, right?
High crimes or misdemeanors. And as I prepared, I said, what is the crime? Because when you're talking about impeachment, you're talking about high crimes or misdemeanors. And I can't seem to find the crime. And honestly, no one has testified of what crime they believe the president of the United States has committed. But when we start talking about things that look like evidence, they want to act like they blind. They don't know what this is. These are our national secrets. Looks like in the to me. This looks like more evidence of our national secrets, say on a stage at Mar-a-Lago. When we're talking about somebody that's committed high crimes, it's at least indictments,
let's say 32 counts related to unauthorized retention of national security secrets, 7 counts related to obstructing the investigation, 3 false statements, 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States, falsifying business records, conspiracy to defraud the United States, 2 counts related to efforts to obstruct the vote certification proceedings, 1 count of conspiracy to violate civil rights, 23 counts related to forgery or false document statements, 8 counts related to soliciting, and I could go on because he's got 91 counts pending right now. But I will tell you what the president has been guilty of. He has unfortunately been guilty of loving his child unconditionally, and that is the only evidence that they have brought forward. And honestly, I hope and pray that my parents love me half as much as he loves his child. Until they find some evidence, we need to get back to the people's work, which means keeping this government open so that people don't go hungry in the streets of the United States. And I will yield.
On that note, I'm over now. Don't forget to hit that like bell before you leave and subscribe if you haven't done so as yet. Also, turn on your notification bells so I can notify you the next video I drop. I'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching.